been extremely successful just having data, because a lot of my counterparts, when they try to measure their workforces, it's very difficult because they don't have all the data. So the coding is the key for me. But from a strategic leader standpoint, I am looking for them to make decisions, right, using data and metrics for compensation, retention, qualification, and performance.
Today on the Daily Scoop podcast from the Scoop News Group, how DOD is using modern tech to manage its workforce. Mark Gorak, Principal Director for Resources and Analysis in the Office of the DOD CIO, joins the podcast. It's Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. Welcome to the Daily Scoop podcast, where you'll hear the latest news and trends facing government leaders. I'm the host of the Daily Scoop podcast, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's dive into today's top headlines. The Trump administration has made its pick for Federal CIO, FedScoop has learned. Two sources familiar with the matter confirmed that Greg Barbaccia has been hired for the Federal CIO role within the Office of Management and Budget. OMB and the White House did not return requests for comment. Barbaccia announced on his LinkedIn page January 24th that he was starting in the position. He replaces Clare Martorana, who served in the role for nearly the entirety of the Biden administration. In the short time the role has been vacant since Martorana stepped down on January 20th, Deputy Federal CIO Drew Myklegard has been filling in an acting capacity. Barbaccia comes to the role with a background of mostly private sector experience, though he started his career in the U.S. Army, according to a public bio. He then went on to build a resume as a technology leader at Palantir, where he spent a decade in roles including as head of intelligence and investigations, blockchain company Elementus, and San Francisco-based credit underwriting technology company Theorem, where he was most recently CISO before taking the federal CIO role. President Donald Trump has also announced a few other top-level administration tech officials, including David Sachs as the White House AI and crypto czar, Michael Kratsios as Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and Lynn Parker as Executive Director of the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology and Counselor to the OSTP Director. In other news, OpenAI has announced a new, more tailored version of ChatGPT called ChatGPT Gov, a service that the company says is meant to accelerate government use of the tool for non-public sensitive data. In an announcement Tuesday, the company said that ChatGPT Gov, which can run in Microsoft's Azure Commercial Cloud or Government Cloud, will give federal agencies increased ability to use OpenAI frontier models. The product is also supposed to make it easier for agencies to follow certain cybersecurity and compliance requirements while exploring potential applications of the technology. Through ChatGPT Gov, federal agencies can use GPT-4o along with a series of other OpenAI tools and build custom search and chat systems developed by the agencies. There's an administrative console for information technology teams and chief information officers to manage use of the technology. The company said it's in conversation with several agencies about using the tool. For more news at the intersection of the federal government and technology, make sure to visit FedScoop.com. The Department of Defense houses one of, if not the biggest, workforces in the world. It is a Fortune 1 company, if you think about it that way. And managing a workforce that large and complex doesn't come easy. However, the department believes that modern technology can play a role in making workforce management more effective. To discuss that, my colleague Wyatt Kash recently spoke with Mark Gorak, Principal Director for Resources and Analysis in the Office of the DOD CIO, about the digital tools and resources the department is leaning on to modernize its workforce management and the challenges such a large enterprise faces in managing its workforce. Let's go now to that interview with Mark Gorak.
Federal agencies face growing pressure to find and support the right mix of talent and skills to support their missions. Keeping up with those demands has grown more challenging, though, as federal agencies contend with increasing pressures to modernize their aging HR and workforce management systems. Increasingly, those systems no longer provide all the human capital management functions or the flexibility needed to recruit and meet the needs of today's modern workforce. That's true for civilian agencies as well as the Department of Defense. I'm Wyatt Kash, and in this segment for the Daily Scoop, sponsored by Workday, I'm here with Mark Gorak, Principal Director for Resources and Analysis in the Office of the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Defense, to talk about efforts to modernize workforce management systems at the DOD. Mark, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And let me start by asking, how would you characterize the state of workforce management systems across the Defense Department compared to other large organizations? And what challenges do they still present to DOD and military leaders as they try to build a modern workforce?
So first, let me define a little bit, because I think lots of people have different ideas of what workforce management systems actually is. I can tell you, I talk to people in the department here who think, oh, that's how we hire people, or that's our recruiting tool, or that's how we measure our time to hire. But to me, it's much, much more in depth than that. To me, a true, and I'll say talent management system, it's from scheduling, PTO, to compensation and benefits, to performance, to talent development, training, retention, and even talent pathways for success, as well as all the other standard things we think about for HR and what that all entails. So it's much broader sense that I want to communicate to the group. In addition, as a senior leader, I need, I look at this from a strategic standpoint, and what are those metrics that we are gathering about the workforce so that we can then make decisions on compensation, retention, qualification, which we call readiness, and then also performance. The other thing I need to make sure everybody understands is in the DOD, the complexity of the department is key to this. We have military with 3 different components and 5 services. We have civilians, we have contractors, and we literally have hundreds of different HR systems that we manage. And keeping track of the data and the quality of that data within those systems are a challenge. The third thing I want to communicate is scale. DOD is the largest enterprise. We have almost 4 million employees, and our current systems do the job for us at our large scale, but don't do the job necessarily on the individual or small organization level to be able to track that talent through time and provide those opportunities. So how do we actually track our large scale workforce, and how do we identify the workforce and know their qualification and data elements? So let me bring that down now to the cyber workforce, which I manage, which is about 225,000. Within our workforce, we have something called work roles, where we don't really care about the occupational series or the label from the services of, what military occupational specialty they are, or what's in the contract for specifically what the task order is. We care about what the individuals are actually doing. What job are they doing? Are they, exploitation analyst? Are they a data scientist? Are they a software developer? And then from that, we measure the knowledge, or we articulate the knowledge, skills, abilities, and tasks required to do that job. And then from there, we actually code that person within that work role. And then we also determine the level of qualification. And we have 3. We have basic, intermediate, and advanced. And we code those. So that gives us the difference between the requirement of what we need and then the actual on hand, what we have. And that helps us determine the gap or what we need to train for. And currently we use a program called Advana, which is Advanced Analytics, which is our data platform where I get actually all of these metrics into the whole entire department. So we are able to see our workforce. That's the first step, I think, is identifying the workforce. And then from that, I make decisions based on, shortages for compensation, retention incentives and tools, recruiting programs that we put out. And then also the big one is the development. So when we have that qualification shortage, what training is required, how much does that cost, what do we budget, et cetera. So those are kind of the where I want to start off from of what we're looking at for measuring our talent with our management systems across the department.
So, Mark, what's the argument that you'd make to senior leaders on why modern data-driven workforce management systems capable of leveraging AI and supporting skills-based hiring and training are really critical to supporting military readiness and the DoD's larger missions?
Yeah, great. So I've been extremely successful just having data, because a lot of my counterparts, when they try to measure their workforces, it's very difficult because they don't have all the data. So the coding is the key for me. But from a strategic leader standpoint, I am looking for them to make decisions, right, using data and metrics for compensation, retention, qualification, and performance. In addition, I need to be able to predict and respond to current recruitment issues. I mean, the market for cyber talent and digital talent in 2022 is much different actually than it is today. How do we measure those trends and see what those trends are so that we can then incentivize our recruitment and retention programs? So data is key to me on this. And then the systems that we measure readiness, it's unique to each military department and service. So I need to take from each of their systems and roll that up for the department as a whole, which is a challenging thing because each of the systems, and the Navy has 4 because they have the Marine Corps, Air Force has 4 with the Space Force. How do I roll up all of those systems and then compile that data at the enterprise level is a challenge. But when I do it, and we've been able to successfully do that for the cyber workforce, that's very powerful to senior leaders to see that data. Now, having said that, we still have a long way to go. I still don't have the talent pathways which I want to develop. In other words, if you're coming in and your goal is to be an exploitation analyst at the expert level, what pathway do you have to go through? What training, what experience do you need in order to get there? We're doing that a lot better on the military department side for our service members, but we still have a long way to go for our civilians. But to me, the key here is once senior leaders see the data, see the trends over time, they can make much more informed decisions. And it also resonates with them to give me the budget support to implement new programs.
So, Mark, can you give some examples of how modern workforce and talent management systems might help leaders find and promote the skills they need faster?
In the cyber workforce, we actually have our Vana platform, which is cloud-based, by the way, and we do have AI analytic tools built in. Now, it still has a long way to go. Especially on educational pathways and development. But we're getting there. So let me give you some examples. I hold a senior level, 4-star level meeting with with all the components, 3 PSAs, chair that meeting. And we actually brief off of a live dashboard. We don't use PowerPoint. We go right to the dashboard. And what is challenging for me in that is I don't always know what the numbers are going to say because it's updated every hour. So sometimes the numbers are different than what I had said, but overall the trends are all the same. And I think by briefing the live dashboard, everybody gets a sense of the numbers. And the first thing most people I see do when you brief a live dashboard is they'll argue a number because the last time they were briefed, the number was different. And the great thing about our dashboards is we read all of their actual systems. So if a number is wrong, I point back to them and say, I'm reading directly from your system. It's a computer-to-computer interface, no human in the loop. So that's the first thing. The second thing is by having live data is in HR world, when we make decisions on about a quarterly or 6-month basis, is not necessarily, you don't need real-time data, but you need to have that trend performance to predict where you're going. I think that is the key, and I think Mike will agree with that one too. So how do we do effective decision-making just looking at the past if we don't have enough data to look at the future also and where we're going, where the shortage is going to be, not just where they are today. And then how do we put in procedures or policy or incentives to reduce those shortages? So that to me is where a really key example is of how we're leveraging near real-time, I'll say, data. The other part of that is, the sentiment analysis, understanding our workers and what their opinions are, why they stay, why they get out, are key to our decisions, because we can address, things like compensation, quality of life, performance, training, development, those things that our workforce, listening to the workforce and where they're headed. Like I said, the workforce of today is totally different than it was even 2 to 4 years ago, especially in a digital or cyber arena, which we affect. So having those trends and adjusting or learning from that analysis, I think, is key.
So, Mark, next I'd like to ask, given the unique demands and rapid changes within the defense landscape, how do you foresee a unified AI-powered human capital management platform helping the DoD better identify and integrate and direct the diverse skills and expertise they need across the organization where and when they're needed? And what are the critical capabilities that you still need or envision needing from such a platform going forward?
Well, the first thing I'll say is agree that DoD can always get better. Well, I remember even 5 years ago, we needed a Mandarin-speaking male, actually, who was a lieutenant colonel or higher, for a meeting the next day in a certain geographical area. And I could go right into our data set. At that time I was in the Army, and literally just search, this rank, this geographical area, this language skill set, this level of proficiency, and in less than a minute, I had a list of 5 names. So we are getting there. We're getting better. The area that I think we need the most help, I think, is in the talent management area. And pathways, both within the service and then also across service, right? So right now we have military HR systems, we have civilian HR systems, we have contractor HR systems, but they don't talk to each other. So if I go between those organizations, if I am a reservist and I come on active duty, and then I go back to my civilian job, or I come in as a civilian within the department, how then do I track all of that experiences across those data sets? So having one enterprise level solution would be key. Our current step is to pull from all those systems and then try to integrate them at the department level, which is a constant challenge, and to keep up and to have that integration. It's almost a losing fight. The second thing I'll say on this is, we prioritize in the department that people are first, right? People are our highest priority. And yet we don't invest, we invest a lot in paying our people, but we don't invest in a lot of our people enterprises and our systems. And I think that's a key that we should look at, is how do we get better at these systems? The third I will say is, we all want to increase hiring or reduce time to hire. A lot of laws and regulations are on the books in Title V and others that somewhat prohibit us from doing that. I don't want to, what I'd like to do is totally re-energize or re-engineer the entire system, rather than trying just to make incremental changes to the current system. So I've never found that to be that practical. You can, it's like the example of, you can beat the horse and you can run a little faster on the racetrack, but I would like to buy a Ferrari and go around the racetrack. So that's kind of where we're looking, how do we, re-engineer and do process improvement across the whole system and enterprise, rather than just trying to fix the current legacy processes that we have in place.
Well, Mark Gorak, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join us here today. Really appreciate your insights on the advances DoD is making and the things that it still needs to continue to develop and find the right skills and talents using more modern human capital management systems. So thank you so much for joining us.
For more on modern workforce management, make sure to visit FedScoop.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Daily Scoop podcast, available on all podcast platforms. If you've already rated the podcast on your platform of choice, thanks so much. High ratings and good reviews of the show help more people to find it. The Daily Scoop podcast is a production of the Scoop News Group in Washington, D.C. Adam Butler and Carlin Fisher help put the show together, and the entire Scoop News Group team contributes. We'll be back tomorrow with more top headlines. Until then, I'm your host, Billy Mitchell. Thanks so much for listening.